Generational mistakes. We should do all we can to avoid repeating the same mistakes our parents made with us. Here now is Gene.
That is a fascinating principle, because there's a human tendency for people to repeat the mistakes their parents made, even though they say themselves, I'm not going to do it that way. We'll explore that in just a moment, but look at the biblical text. Genesis 37, 1-4. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed. Now he's back home, where he grew up, the land of Canaan. And these are the family records of Jacob, which takes us back in the context. And at 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. Now notice, the young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. It's not specific in terms of what they were doing out there, but if you knew anything about pagan culture, you can imagine that there was some horrible immorality that was going on. Now Israel, that is Jacob, Jacob's name now is changed to Israel as a result of that encounter with God that night. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age. Favoritism towards Joseph. You think the other brothers saw that? Well, they couldn't help it. He made a robe of many colors for him. I mean, he honored him. This was a kingly kind of robe. This wasn't just simply a colored robe. This was a positional symbol in the family. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him. Jealousy results in hatred. And they couldn't bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. They could not have a relationship with him. They rejected him. They would not communicate with him. And when they did, it was nasty. And so consequently, we have here a repeat of something that Jacob experienced himself as a young boy growing up. Principle 37 in Genesis says, we must be on constant guard against Satan's tactics to keep us from being wise and mature parents. That takes us back to Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob's parents, and Isaac loved Esau, and Rebekah loved Jacob. So Jacob is doing the very, very same thing that his parents did. It's repeating a generational mistake. Showing favoritism, and that is one of the most serious results of this kind of situation. The most serious result of that favoritism is anger. And you know, I was thinking about this, that I think as parents sometimes we have to be very, very careful, particularly as our children grow. And in our culture, particularly when we start out as young parents, we're generally speaking starting with virtually very little, and we don't have much to share. And as our children come along, we have more to share. And if we're not careful, we can be showing favoritism to the younger in ways that we didn't show it to the older. Now you talk about needing wisdom there, because the older remember what they didn't have compared with the younger do have. Does that mean you refuse or don't share with the younger? It means you handle this in a way that is wise in relationship to balance and equity. And you need to really keep records on that. And as grandparents, we're even more vulnerable if we're not careful. Because we're looking back and we have generally more to share with things we couldn't do with even our own children. And we've got to be very, very careful and be equitable. And I want to pay tribute to my wife, who has an incredibly good memory and record system for being fair. And if you don't write these things down and think through these things, what you did for one and what you do for the other, you'll forget. And you've got to be equitable. And our children do not forget. They notice those things. It takes a lot of wisdom. So you say a principle like this, so far removed? No, it's very, very relevant, isn't it? Generational mistakes. We've got to be very, very careful. Now here's the question. Why is it easy to repeat the same mistakes our parents made, even though we determine we will not. And I have to answer that by saying it's a bit of a mystery. It even confuses specialists, psychologists, psychiatrists. How in the world do you figure this out? What I can say, it's a natural tendency. I think at times it's subconscious, which makes it even more dangerous. I ministered to a young woman and her husband, and she started out well, being responsive, and then she got involved in an adulterous affair. And I remember one day when I was confronting her and talking to her, she appreciated my concern, but she said, "Gene, I am doing the very thing I hated in my father." And I knew she hated this in her father because he was a very promiscuous man in relationship to her mother. And she knew about it. And here she is, a grown woman now with children. She commits the same sin, and she told me up front, "I'm doing the very thing I hated in my father." And the sad part was, she wouldn't listen to me. I'm going to do it anyway. Now later, she came back and got right with God. It's too late to restore her marriage. But the fact is, I thought, what an illustration of a generational mistake that becomes a part of your thinking in ways you don't even understand it. And so consequently, we have to be aware of this and determine in our minds and hearts we can be self-deceived because it happens. And it's a sad situation when it involves sexual abuse particularly, where abused people turn around and abuse others and keep that chain of abuse going. But that can be broken in Jesus Christ.